Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very thrilled to welcome Cody Dericks back to the podcast today to talk about The Candidate, released 50 years ago in June of 1972, winner of the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay of 72. How are we doing, Cody?
Hi, very good. Very excited to talk about this actor who's, he's pretty good at his job. He's got a nice face. He's I guess you could call him handsome, Robert Redford.
Yeah, I'd say the big flaw with The Candidate is that they should have gotten an actor who was a little bit more attractive, right?
Like, come on, not believable that people wouldn't just vote for him knowing nothing about him.
I love that in the movie there is someone who says they're like interviewing a bunch of people, and doesn't she say, "Oh, I voted for him because he's handsome."
Right. Well, and there's another lady who's like, "I always said handsome is as handsome does," which I don't know what that means, but it feels like a drag on Mr. Redford.
Yeah. So this is the first time in a year and a half on Film at 50 we're talking Robert Redford. He had a film at like the end of 1970 that was more obscure, so I didn't do it. And then he had another one, I think it was called The Hot Rock, that came out in January of 72 that I didn't read a lot of great things about. So I'm like, if I'm going to talk about Redford and do a segment on him, let's hold off until we get to The Candidate, which is like his first great film of the 70s.
Yeah, this is a real Redford pick. Like, he's definitely, it's centered around him. It's right before he becomes, well, I mean, I guess he already was pretty big because of Butch Cassidy, but I feel like this is right on the peak of him becoming like major movie star, because then it's like The Way We Were, The Sting, Great Gatsby.
Yeah, 73 we get both The Way We Were and The Sting in the same year. And the only Oscar nomination he gets in his long career, if I'm not mistaken, for acting is for The Sting.
Yeah,
which is like a weird factoid.
And Paul Newman doesn't get nominated. It's bizarre. It's weird. I mean, he does a lot of these two-handers, like there's that, and then there's All the President's Men with him and Hoffman, and
right.
Yeah, he doesn't get nominated for them. It's weird.
All the President's Men, which we'll talk about at the end, is such a spectacular film. It's kind of surprising to me that neither he nor Hoffman got nominated for that movie, which is crazy.
And then Jason Robards wins.
Yeah. Oh, right. Twice, 2 years in a row for supporting actor. If I'm not mistaken. Julia's the other one, I think.
The Julia win is so weird. He does nothing in that movie, but whatever. He didn't even show up to the ceremony.
He didn't even show up to the second one.
Nope.
Yeah, but Robert Redford, always one of my favorites, especially like classic actors of like the 70s and 80s. I've always really enjoyed whenever he's in a movie. I think he makes anything better by his presence. Like some of the films he's made in the last 20 years are a little shaky. I don't know if you've seen all of them, but he's all like Walk in the Woods, and some of these are like like he makes them better and more watchable. Like I've always found him a very interesting actor.
Yeah, and I mean now he's retired, which good for him. Take your time.
Yeah, he's his last film was The Old Man and the Gun, like starring role in a movie. He's in Avengers.
I know that's the thing. I'm looking at his IMDb now, and it is unfortunate that he has like 2 voice roles, but the last thing he has is Avengers Endgame, which I think he's
one scene. Wasn't he just briefly
like half his face or something? He probably waves at the camera. I don't remember. He's barely.
He probably shot that around the same time as Old Man and the Gun, right?
Which is such a perfect send-off.
That was a great send-off, Old Man and the Gun. I really enjoyed that. I remember I was like, I've read before, like, oh, he's retiring, this is it. And you never know if that's true. Like Daniel Day-Lewis retiring after Phantom Thread, he's young enough that you're like, he might come back at some point. You don't really know. But sometimes they don't announce a retirement. I don't remember Gene Hackman announcing that he was leaving. All of a sudden he just stepped away.
I don't remember exactly,
retirement,
because that was also his last role. I think is like Welcome to Mooseport.
What is this craziness? Jack Nicholson too, with that Reese Witherspoon movie. I can never remember. How do you know?
One of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life.
This craziness of like you have a 50+ year career. You don't need to end with your best film, but like end with something strong. Like Cameron Diaz, Annie.
Yikes.
I think Cameron Diaz is going to come back. She's pulling a Jane Fonda, 15 to 20 years. I think she's going to come back for something because she's still in the, like, you still see her all over Instagram and she's active. Like, I think she'll come back.
It's a smart move because it makes people miss you. You go from oversaturated and quote unquote overrated to, oh, Cameron Diaz, I miss her, which is all people talk about now.
Yeah, what I love about
her.
Cameron Diaz leaving was that she really, outside of maybe The Counselor, was that the Ridley Scott movie she was really good in?
Yeah.
Her last like 5 or 6 credits were not great. It was just a lot of just, I mean, Bad Teacher is fun from 2011, but like her last year where she was in 3 movies and they're all kind of forgettable, it kind of made sense for her to just be like, boom, boom, boom. Actually, okay, bye.
Good. Yeah. Right. I'm looking at it now. It's The Other Woman, Sex Tape, and Annie, which nice.
The only one of those 3 I saw was Sex Tape, which I remember was amusing. I think I rented it. It was fine, but it wasn't great.
I didn't see it. I saw Annie
Sex
though.
Tape was not on your.
No, I know. The funny thing is, it won the Palme d'Or, and I still didn't want to see it. So that was odd.
Wait, what won the Palme d'Or?
No, I was making a joke about Sex Tape winning the Palme d'Or. It's fine.
I thought you were moving over to Annie for a second. I was like, wait, did that go to Cannes?
No, that won Berlin, actually, I believe.
But yeah, her case was strange because she was just so prolific for the longest time, for 20 years, and then it was just like, and then she was out. Mm-hmm. That must have been an interesting conversation with her agents. Like after doing 3 movies back to back like that. Okay, right. Bye.
I'm good. Thank you all. Actually, no thank you, because you got me horrible jobs. But
typically it's like, okay, now it's like 3 years between movies. Now it's 4 and then slow fade out. But that wasn't the case with her. Robert Redford was active throughout 50 plus years. I looked up, like he was in films in the mid 60s. Like he started pretty early. Mm-hmm. And he of course moved on to directing films with Ordinary People in 1980. And he directed at least 7 or 8 films. Like
I'm looking at it now. It looks like,
I mean, he wasn't directing a movie every other year. Like it was, they'd kind of be spaced out.
Yeah, he only did like 3 in the 90s, 2 in the 2000s. He really took his time.
I mean, he had a couple big ones in the 90s. I remember he directed River Runs Through It, and then he directed Quiz Show, which I believe he was nominated for Best Director for Quiz Show.
I think so. I mean, it definitely got a Best Picture nomination.
Yeah. So
yeah, he was nominated. Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the last 2 or 3 he directed weren't as big a deals. Lions for Lambs, which I just made a video for my YouTube channel on Andrew Garfield, and I had to go back and research Lions for Lambs. I didn't watch it again, but I was just watching clips from it.
Oh boy,
that was his first movie, Lions for Lambs. And I talk about in my video, I talk about how I still remember seeing the trailer, and it wasn't Meryl Streep and Tom Cruise or Robert Redford that made me go. It was just a quick glimpse of a young Andrew Garfield. I'm like, who's this guy?
Hello.
So that's been exciting to see his career just blossom over the last 15 years. Been fantastic. He started his new show on Hulu, which is really good so far.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't watch TV.
You don't watch TV?
Not really. Movies. I'm more of a movie dude.
Yeah, I'm more movie too. Like for Gold Derby, I'm starting to write some Emmy pieces because it's hard to talk. It's hard to talk about the Oscars in like April, May for next year. It's like, okay, what do you talk about? Well, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 could get in, maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
For sound, it's like no. I mean, of course, we've had a couple films so far this year that I think will get in. I think the Batman will get in for at least 2 or 3.
Get a makeup or something. Yeah,
maybe. Something. I don't know, but it's not like the Northman. It's getting. I don't think that's going to get in for anything.
Unfortunately, no. Which I loved that movie. So
if it came out in like November or something, maybe. But do you believe in that, stuff. Cody? Like if a movie has a shot to maybe get in for a few technicals, it has a better shot if it comes out in like November versus like April? Or does that not?
It depends.
Does that not make a difference?
It depends on the category, because there's certain categories like costume and production design that usually get like swept up in Best Picture nominees lately.
Oh, okay.
But then like visual effects and sound, I think you can mostly come out.
Visual effects,
kind of whenever. Visual effects, especially,
not as important,
and makeup because the makeup branch is weird. But visual effects.
Well, like Cruella won costume, and that came out in May, right?
Right, but I mean,
and it felt weird predicting it. I was like, came out in May, but it seems like the obvious choice.
But then you look at the material. So
So when you were last on my podcast, our conversation was in February about Vampire Circus. Go check out that episode where we talked 20% about the movie and 80% about the upcoming Oscars, where that was supposed to drop in April, and I had to push it up to mid-March because we talked so much about the Oscar ceremony. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense if I drop this in April. And who was your prediction to win Best Actress there, Cody?
Oh, are you gonna mock me? Is that what you're asking me? I don't remember.
Were you pretty confident about Nicole Kidman in mid-February?
I was, yeah.
I remember being like, I have no
Listen.
idea, Cody. What's and you were like, it's Nicole.
Well, I wasn't alone saying that, Mr. Rowe. So before you tease.
No. I don't think any of us really knew what was happening until
No.
SAG kind of it
SAG
was
is when I
weird
know.
when Chastain won SAG and she gave a speech. Kidman didn't get to, give a speech at the Globes. It was like, unless like there's a big shocker win at Critics' Choice or something. I don't know how Chastain loses this.
No, because SAG, it gave voters permission to vote for her. Like, it was like, it's okay, you can vote for this movie that you didn't see. She's really good in it. Don't worry.
Yeah. I was like, I watched it and I was like, it's okay, but she's really bringing it. And it was kind of a cool story in that she had been trying to get off the ground for a decade, and like she clearly like had a lot of passion for it, and she's going for it in that movie. So I don't know how well that win will age over the next 10 years. Like, I don't know if in 10 years people are like, oh, one of the best wins of the 2020s was Jessica Chastain.
I think it's going to age better than if Nicole had won her second Oscar for that.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I say that as somebody who kind of liked the movie and her performance, but it would have been kind of the same way that like when Coda won Best Picture, I was like, oh, that's not good for his legacy, which is funny because every movie wants to win Best Picture, but some movies, that's all the conversation becomes is what they beat for Best Picture. And I have a feeling that's gonna be the case. That
was wild, just how quickly Coda just took it over.
I think about it. I still have to go like, oh yeah, that one Best Picture, because within like 10 days it went from, I assumed, number 4 or 5 likely to take Best Picture to being like, oh yeah, that's gonna win Best Picture of the year.
Like, until the last week, I just was like, how could it beat a movie that has 12 nominations? It just seems impossible. And it just by the night I had to switch over, and I was like, it won all the big awards it needed. So it just makes sense that Coda will get it.
I'm one of those people that stuck with Power of the Dog.
You did all the way to the end?
Yeah.
Even after PGA?
Even after PGA. And part of me was like,
okay.
The thing was, I was going back and forth so much, and we don't have to talk about the freaking 2021 Oscars. Enough has been said about it, but
yeah, we'll get through
it. When PGA happened, it started becoming like, is it Coda or Power of the Dog? And I would switch back and forth, and either camp gave me like stress. So I just went with the one that on paper felt more like a Best Picture winner and had all the nominations, and Coda only had the 3. So I don't regret sticking with Power of the Dog, but I do wish I had predicted Coda.
12 nominations, 1 win. It's kind of insane. Like, it's happened before, like Color Purple getting 11 nominations and winning 0. Like, it happens, but
right. I mean, it happens all the time where like, they see a movie like Power of the Dog and go, we could give Best Picture to the actual best film of the year, or we could give it to this nice movie that made me feel good. And I like Coda. Coda is very nice. It's a good movie, but like, whatever. I mean, anyway.
Coda was my favorite of all of them, but that's just me.
Well, then you're like an Oscar voter then. Congratulations.
Coda had me in tears at the end. I don't know.
Yeah, I cried too. I watched it at Sundance, and I watched it again right before the Oscars.
It's not like the best like made film of 2021, but it worked for me. I thought it was
a
beautiful.
Totally fine film that I would not have voted for Best Picture.
But yeah, so interesting award season, and Coda winning Best Picture with only 3 nominations, pretty rare. I'm currently working on my next YouTube video, is all about the 5th Academy Awards and Grand Hotel, which won Best Picture with only that nomination.
Yeah.
Which is will never happen again, right? Like, to be nominated for Best Picture and then you win picture, but nothing else.
You always hear people talking about the Oscars, and every year somebody brings up like, I think we're due for another Grand Hotel. The problem is movies don't even get nominated for just Best Picture anymore. So it's not like the opportunity has even happened. It comes close to where things get like 2 nominations, like Blindside or Selma. Like, it could happen there. And
The Post. I believe The Post got picture and actress. Yeah.
Yes, but like, no, they don't. I can't remember the last time they nominated a movie for just Best Picture. It's probably the 30s, like Grand Illusion or something.
Like, I feel like of those 3 we just mentioned, I feel like Selma, if that had gotten only picture, like, that is the kind of movie that maybe could have pulled it off if it won like SAG Ensemble or something and was like a late breaking, I don't know.
And if it becomes a vote of like, we love this movie, we don't care what the Academy says, which happens sometimes.
Yeah. But Grand Hotel is a movie I'm researching right now. And it's so interesting because it's like 8 nominations, or maybe it's 9. It's like a lot. And most of the movies have nominations in other categories. One of them won in director and a screenplay. And then Grand Hotel wins, and it's not even nominated in director or screenplay. It's like, how does that happen?
No,
That's what I'm exploring right now, trying to figure out. But in terms of going back to the candidate, Robert Redford, talking about the Oscars, do you think he should have been considered as an acting nominee for this movie?
Let me take a look at the other nominees, but
I mean, Marlon Brando would win for The Godfather,
right? Marlon Brando, and then there's
What are the other nominees for 72?
Hang on 1 second,
because I feel like I don't think anyone was going to beat Marlon Brando, but I feel like there was some room in 72, which is not the best year, I would say, of the 70s for films. Like I'm looking into the future right now, the stretch of some like, hit or miss kind of titles.
72 is funny because it's so top heavy, where you have Cabaret and The Godfather, which are just like two of the best films of all time.
We could have just ended the year in March and we would have been good.
Right. The other nominees for actor were Peter O'Toole in The Ruling Class, which I've never seen.
Okay.
Paul Winfield in Sounder, who's like borderline supporting. Okay. And then Sounder. Michael Caine and Laurence Olivier for Sleuth.
Okay. Yes. Sleuth, I'm very excited to talk about.
Sleuth is pretty good.
You've seen Sleuth?
Yes, I've seen it. Okay. I've seen it. I've seen the remake. The remake is not very good.
But... The remake, Michael Caine comes back, right?
He plays.
Does he play the other role?
Olivier exactly.
Oh,
which is
that's
fun.
Cool.
That's cute.
How clever! Didn't Kenneth Branagh direct the second one?
He sure did. And like the first movie, not to spoil it, it's kind of like there's like a lot of queer subtext, and
cool.
The remake makes it like not subtext, and it was a bad decision.
So that's interesting. I don't know if that would happen today. Like if you had a movie like Sleuth and you would nominate both. I feel like you would pick one for lead actor and the other for supporting actor.
Absolutely.
like a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of thing. I don't think you would just have them both in lead. That doesn't really happen anymore, does it?
No, the last pair of dual nominees in Best Actor was Amadeus. So
that's the last one.
84, almost 40.
Oh wow. Okay.
And for women, it's 91, and for Thelma and Louise.
It's like when for Chicago at the Globes, Catherine Zeta-Jones was put in the lead actress category with Zellweger, and then Zellweger won. And then it's like, who was it who made the joint? Like, go supporting.
They made a smart choice.
That was a very smart choice.
Yeah. Same with Carol. They were both lead at the Globes and not at the.
Okay.
Well, those are both Miramax / movies, so that's probably
at the at the Oscars, don't they choose? Are you able to, like, if you're in charge of that, like, are you able to say no, Catherine Zeta-Jones has to be considered only for supporting, or is that kind of out of their hands?
So in the Oscars, there's FYC ads and campaigning and precursors that basically are instructing voters where to put the actors, but they can vote for them wherever they want, which is how we got two actors in supporting for Judas and the Black Messiah, when like either one of them is for sure a lead or both of them are. Like there's no way that they're actually both supporting. Voters just did what they wanted.
Okay. And that's how Kate Winslet got pushed into lead actrors for the Reader, right?
Same with Keisha Castle Hughes for Will Rider. They ignored what was happening up to that point and put them in the right category.
Did that have something to do with her being considered lead for Revolutionary Road? Was that like a weird thing? I don't like what happened there.
Probably happened is, so there's the rule that you can't have two performances from the same actor nominated, which is the acting category is the only place that's the case, because you can have
director, you can have two,
right? Like Soderbergh, thank you. But for actors, it just what happens is if you get nominated twice in the same category, like votes wise, they just kick out, I think, the one that gets less votes. So I actually think she probably got technically nominated for Revolutionary Road and The Reader, and they had to kick one of them out.
Interesting. And then she would have also gotten votes in supporting actress for The Reader, but not enough.
I guarantee she had enough votes to get nominated in both categories for The Reader and to get 2 nominations in lead actress, because she was just.
They should have nominated her in both supporting and lead for the same movie. That hasn't happened.
Fun. Yeah. That actually is against the rules too.
I would say it probably against the rules,
but not anymore. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Redford would have been considered lead actor for the candidate. I don't know how you would make the case for him being supporting in this.
For sure. Yeah. He is the candidate.
And the actor who plays Crocker to be lead. No, I don't think so. So yeah, so let's get into the candidate. That's our movie today. This is one of the, we talked about Godfather and Cabaret, but it's been a stretch of talking about movies that have not even been nominated for anything at the Oscars. I mean, it's hard, right? And like movies released in April, May, June, you don't see it a whole lot. So for a June release to be an Oscar winner for original screenplay, that's something.
And the funny thing is, Godfather and Cabaret were like spring releases, and they just lasted a whole year. So
Cabaret was like February 11th or 10th or
February
12th.
13th. It says.
13th.
And then Godfather
was mid to late March.
14th. Yeah,
March 14th. Yeah. That's again something we won't ever see. I don't know how like today you could release a movie in February and have it. I mean, you had Get Out. That was like an exception.
Yeah, that was like February, because that was probably the closest we've come recently to an early year Best Picture winner since like Silence of the Lambs. I think it was the last one to do it.
Yeah, it was just a huge hit, and it was one of those movies that got people talking all throughout the year. It didn't fade after April. Like it was still being talked about. People were buying it on Blu-ray and DVD, and it just kept going. And it just, it was like, I remember thinking this could maybe win picture. Like it's just the talk of it. So yeah, I think that's what I voted for. I thought it's going to get screenplay and picture. I think it's going to do it.
I predicted that too. So
did you predict it?
I have a bad track record with predicting Best Picture. Nomadland was the first one I got right since like Argo. So and now I'm back
Argo 2012
dog.
And Nomadland 2020. I'm usually pretty good with picture. You can usually tell based off of like PGA and SAG Ensemble, and you get a feel. You know, sometimes it's down to 2, but
I do well in the other categories, and then I just lose my mind in Best Picture. I don't know.
Yeah, but we'll leave it for a little later. We'll talk about the Best Original Screenplay category and the other category it was nominated for. You know, the other category got a nomination.
Best Sound, right?
Sound.
So weird.
I was like, why would it get in for Best Sound? Any ideas?
Well, in the original theatrical cut, I think there were a lot of lasers and explosions, and they just cut that for the home video. So.
Yeah, we'll get into its two categories. But first, for our listeners who might not know the story of this movie, you haven't seen it, if you happen to not take American government class in high school, because that's where I first saw this movie. I don't know about you, but I would say our teacher, it was senior year of high school government. He might have showed us like 3 or 4 films throughout the year, and this was one of them. And I mean, it's pretty clean, right? I mean, it's not one of those movies like you have to turn the volume down.
Yeah, or cover the screen.
Yeah, but this movie has not escaped my mind since I saw it many years, sadly, very many years ago when I was a senior in high school. So, without a candidate to run for the Senate seat against admired Republican Crocker Jarman, one of the greatest names I've ever heard. Yeah. Crocker Jarman. It sounds like something you'd see at like the supermarket. You know, I love it. Campaign manager Marvin Lucas recruits leftist lawyer Bill McKay, played by Redford. McKay's appearance piques the public's interest, and gradually Lucas pushes McKay toward a more centrist message. As McKay's original and honest platform gets watered down, his popularity increases so much that he is running even with Jarman as election day approaches. So it's like this interesting story of this guy who's kind of just pulled away, like a guy not really in politics, who's just kind of thrown into this, a guy expecting to not win, like he's just kind of expecting to just go along for this ride and push his agenda and his message and hope he gets some eyes and some ears, and has no idea just how popular he's going to become. This is I think it's a pretty original film for 72, right? It might not play as well for people today because it's just politics 24/7, and we've seen so many things. It's kind of like watching this movie. It's definitely of its time, but for 72 in its context, I think it's like a really interesting, original political film, right?
Right. Well, what I was struck by with this movie is it comes out at a really specific time in American politics, because I was looking up the dates so this comes out on June 29th, 1972, and on June 17th of that year, so just like about 2 weeks beforehand, was the Watergate break-in. So we're at a point in American politics where things are about to get very the seedy underbelly that everybody assumes is about to get very much brought to the forefront. And I have a part of my thinking of how the modern day like political American ideology has been affected by Watergate is it made people a lot more cynical about their politics. Not that they weren't before, but it became much more mainstream to be distrusting of everything happening in politics. And this movie reflects a really interesting time where that was like just on the precipice of happening. And it kind of shows the cynical machinations of what's actually happening in politics in a really interesting way, because it's nobody in this movie besides Robert Redford's candidate actually seems invested in changing the country.
No.
And even he is willing to, sacrifice his morals just to get elected to go along with the machine.
Yeah, like at the end of the debate where he goes off script and he just starts talking about all the important issues of the day that they didn't even talk about in the whole hour plus whatever long it was debate. And like you see that fire in his eyes of like he wants to make changes. And you're absolutely right. Everyone else in this movie, it's about getting, making him win, or his dad, like, putting on a good image for himself as he supports his son. And nobody really wants to make any change. Exactly.
No. Right. Or not even change necessarily, because there is conservative politics in this movie, but like affect the country in any way, or affect leadership or government ends, or just the country in general.
Yeah, it's just about winning. And I feel like that's something that Bill starts to realize as the movie goes on, as his message is getting more and more watered down. He can't talk about the things he wants. They bring up abortion and what is his guy? He's like, no, don't talk about that.
Yeah, it just
like this,
completely.
No,
no, thank you.
Played by Peter Boyle, the great Peter Boyle, who
I barely recognized him.
Active in the industry for many decades. I've always enjoyed him. It was fun to see him in this 2 years before Young Frankenstein.
Yep. Of course.
Right? I think his breakthrough was in 1970, a movie called Joe. He was the lead, and it was Susan Sarandon's debut in a film.
Oh, okay.
I watched that 2 years ago, right before I started the podcast. It came out, I think it was July of 1970. I started this in September, so it was right before, but I watched it, and it was really interesting. So it was great to see him in this. He always just a character actor I always enjoy. And we also have Melvin Douglas as Robert Redford's dad. Very famous classic film actor, and he had just been nominated for Best Actor the year before this for I Never Sang for My Father, movie with Gene Hackman, which was the 5th episode I did for this podcast. Really terrific, underrated drama, kind of a father-son drama. So I saw his name in the
2 Oscar wins, because he has 1 win for HUD in the 60s, then he wins at the end of this decade for being there.
Yeah, so he's at a really good place in his career. It's not I feel like not everyone and pushing 70 and over or getting really great parts in films, and he was definitely one of them. So it's a really great cast. The director is also fine. He has some good credits to his name. I mean, nothing like really spectacular, but Michael Ritchie directed this. He directed Downhill Racer a few years before this with Robert Redford from '69. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
No, I haven't.
It was on the Criterion Channel a while back, and I watched it. Really interesting. And like he has some good credits to his name too. And I mean, it's funny when the movie starts, it says a Redford Ritchie production.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you can feel like this really is in some ways like the first Robert Redford like production. Like it feels like he's the one who wanted this movie to happen, right? Did you get that sense too?
I definitely did. It felt, I don't know the exact behind the scenes nature of it, but it felt like something that either was a passion project of his or the studio centered the movie around him because he was, Robert Redford.
Yeah.
And I might be wrong, but I feel like this is one of the first or earliest times he is front and center by himself, because his other big movies before this are like Barefoot in the Park, which are him and Jane Fonda, and Butch Cassidy, which is obviously him and Paul Newman. So I feel like this is one of the earlier times that a big movie was made with him by himself as the lead.
Yeah. And speaking of Newman, I should mention it is kind of interesting that your first time on my podcast was talking about a Paul Newman movie a few months ago. Sometimes a Great Notion. It is interesting to have you back to talk about for the first time on Film at 50 now a Robert Redford movie. Right. I didn't plan that.
The pair, but
I just realized that right now. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, this is really his movie. I don't know how many actors at the time would have been a great fit for this. I mean, this is the period of Pacino's just starting out. Nicholson might have been an interesting choice. I don't know if he might have been too like cynical or something.
Yeah, he's a little scary. Obviously, I love Jack Nicholson. I think part of why you need somebody like Robert Redford is because he has to, be extremely handsome and charming enough that people would be willing to vote for him, not even knowing his politics or having his politics change on a dime. So there were actors back then, obviously, who were handsome enough to lead a movie who weren't just Robert Redford, but I really think he's the ideal choice for this character.
I did write in my notes, I asked, is this the hottest Redford's ever been in a movie?
I think probably. He's
The
really
hair, like he has the mutton
he's really
chops at the
sexy in this
beginning, and that
movie.
the mutton chops at the beginning took me out. I didn't like that. But then they were like, oh, you have to get a haircut and shave those sideburns.
Yeah.
And then after he did that, I was like, here we
Now,
are.
now you want to vote for him.
I was already filling out my absentee. I mean, I was like, write and vote. Here we go. Because I could see
poll,
I could
know.
see a big chunk of the population just like watching him on TV and be like, okay, yeah,
I
here's
don't know what he's talking about, but yeah. Well, that I think he's really good in this movie. I don't want to say it's necessarily my favorite performance of his, but it might be. It's definitely up there. I think he totally sells both the charm that would be necessary to be a politician at any point in time, but I think he also shows the insecurity of him really well. He's really good at playing somebody who's trying to do the thing I'm doing right now, finish the sentence before it's finished in your brain. He like stumbles over his words a lot. He backtracks and rephrases things. And part of that is writing, obviously, but I think he sells it really well.
Yeah. I love his character in this movie because he could have played it like this gung-ho, like, yeah, I'm going to get into the game and I'm going to try to make change. He's kind of like almost apathetic a bit at first. He's kind of like, I don't know. He talks to his wife. Should I do this? And she's like, yeah, you should do this. And, you know, the first time he's interviewed, he's just like almost like awkwardly looking down. And then he goes, do you have any questions? And the guy says, well, what is your take on what property taxes? And he just kind of thinks and he goes, I don't know.
Right.
You know? So
Which
he's not
refreshing.
like like showing up on day one like, I am going to make change. I'm going to do the best I can. And then as the movie goes on, he starts to realize, oh, my message is being lost and woe is me. Like that, I feel like it would have been more just predictable. But the arc of his character throughout the movie, the way it is, I just thought that was more interesting and more realistic because the movie is so much about realism. The documentary feel to this movie is pretty spectacular. I really loved the way that the camera is used and the episodic nature to it. And it doesn't have a lot of like forced behind the scenes drama scenes. We don't get like a villainous Crocker Jarman in the back room. Like we gotta get rid of this guy kind of like, it's just kind of show. It's like matter of fact, documentary style, as if it's really happening. And at some points it does feel like they're just capturing Redford, like trying to become the senator. Like it doesn't feel like a movie.
I mean, it felt this is a very obvious comparison, but I was getting a lot of Robert Altman out of this movie.
Right. Robert Altman.
A lot of the, like you said, the documentary style is definitely, I would call it like a docudrama. It is trying to be very fly on the wall in its style, even though it's fictional, obviously, but there's a lot of overlapping dialogue and it's not filmed in a very cinematic way, for lack of a better phrase.
No, not really.
Showing in its direction, except for one scene I want to mention, but otherwise it's a pretty grounded, like earthy movie about politics.
Yeah, it's for a movie that won Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars. It's interesting that so much of it doesn't feel like it's written. It feels like they show up on the beach and it feels like the director was like, okay, grab a couple cameras, let's follow Bob down to the beach and we'll just have him kind of just improv with these guys and just talk about, it's some of it doesn't feel like it's written. And I think that's why the screenplay is so great, because I'm sure it was very well planned all the way through. A lot of the dialogue was probably there in the script, but it doesn't feel it. And so that's what makes it really cool too.
No, I thought that was a smart choice. I think it really gives the movie a feeling of this is actually what's happening in your politics without even knowing it. There's plenty of political movies that are big and grandstandy and very cinematic. I'm thinking of something like, what is that movie? Primary Colors.
Mike Nichols, Elaine May.
Right. Or some are like this, or like All the President's Men, which isn't about politicians necessarily, even though it is, but still it has that kind of newsy documentary feel.
In college, I had a friend once, I can't remember how it came up, but like she wanted to watch a 70s film and the movie I chose to show her was All the President's Men. I'm like, if this doesn't do it for you, I don't know what will.
It's actually, that's my mom's favorite movie. So I've seen the movie a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I'm like, how did Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman never work together again? Like, they're amazing together.
I know, right?
Right? I don't think they ever appeared in another film together. But at least we have the one.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those weird instances that I guess Robert Redford was really into two-handers.
It's like who said in the last year, someone said, you know who never worked together, which is weird? Jane Fonda and Warren Beatty never made a film.
That is weird. How is that possible? Yeah.
Like they were just like right there together, same stature of their careers for at least 15, 20 years.
Both
and they
like
never
symbols that became more legitimized through awards and the types of projects they were working on.
I mean, Warren Beatty wasn't as prolific as some of these other guys. Like sometimes he would go like 3-4 years before the next movie. But Jane Fonda would work with Robert Redford, I believe, 4 times: The Chase, Barefoot in the Park, The Electric Horseman, and Our Souls at Night, the newer film they did in 2017 for Netflix. So it's weird that she would work with Redford 4 times and she never made a film with Warren Beatty. There's still time.
That's true. They're both
Someone write it. Like I tweeted the other day, I'm like, there should be a romantic comedy with Jeff Goldblum and Jamie Lee Curtis. Let's make it happen.
Oh my God. Jamie Lee Curtis, who is doing better than ever right now. So
Jamie Lee, man, her career ups and downs. I mean, for a while there, you didn't see her very much. And then now she's in, it's like Halloween, Knives Out, Halloween Kills, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yep.
Halloween Ends.
I saw an interview with her where she was talking about when she turned 60, she decided to just like go for it and just started being in more movies. I think she's written some movies. She has a production company now. So she's really she's doing great. I'm happy to see it.
I adore her. So there are these like classic screen actors who we all love that just for whatever reason have never been in a project together. In the case of The Candidate, it's really just him all the time. Yeah. And that's okay. I don't know how many actors can carry a movie like this this is almost 2 hours long. And we get, of course, other characters throughout, but it's really his show and he pulls you through. He's just so charismatic all the way through this movie.
Yeah, I think he's really great.
And the screenplay is fantastic. So screenwriter Jeremy Larner, I have a few things about him. He was under pressure to work quickly so the film would be out in time for the 1972 presidential election campaign.
Oh, okay.
I think the California campaign that was in July of 72. So they wanted the movie out before that. That's why it came out in June. I mean, I feel like if this movie had come out at the very end of October, that would have been a little bit too on the nose, right?
Right. Well, and yeah. Well, the 72 election is that crazy one where Nixon wins basically the entire map. So
Nixon just cleaned house in November 72. Do we know who was he up against in 72? I don't know.
George McGovern, I think.
George McGovern. And then Nixon steps down and was it 74? Wasn't it 2 years later?
Because there was midterm that year. So it was crazy.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a very interesting time for politics in the country in 72. So it kind of makes sense that this movie would come out now. I don't think this movie works if it's 68. Or if it's like 80, I don't know. I think that'd be fine. I just think this particular point in history makes the movie more interesting.
Right. Well, like I said, it's on the verge of politics becoming cracking wide open with Watergate. Plus, we're in a really weird point with Vietnam, where the war is extremely unpopular by now, and it's heading towards its end eventually. And JFK, we're about 10 years out from him being assassinated. So it's a really very strange time in American politics that a lot of the qualities of that era, I think, are still being felt today.
But Larner, I mean, he had to write the script very quickly. And to do so, he would write every day from noon to 3 a.m.
Oh my God.
I'm like, wait, whoa.
Go to bed.
like once you're at hour 6, you have to stop.
No, there's nothing I can do that long in my life.
I'm like, I'm not to say screenwriting is not easier, I would say, than writing a novel or something, but I don't know if writing 15 hours a day every day for a month is necessary for a feature-length screenplay. It just seems like
I feel like
that's a lot.
Yeah.
For a script, you're not writing a 500-600 page novel.
And it's not an overly complicated script. There's not a ton of characters, but I think it's a very smart script. It's very tight. There's very little fat. I think that probably is because of the insane writing schedule you just said.
He said that without the help he received from Robert Towne, he would not have been able to complete the script. So the great Robert Towne, who I believe won an Oscar for Chinatown. Is that right? I think he won.
That is correct.
I know he was nominated. I think he won for Chinatown. And
Chinatown definitely won
screenplay,
original screenplay.
One of the. So he Was it original or that was original?
It was
right?
original, yeah.
So he's one of the most famous screenwriters, I would say, of all time. And so he said that Robert Towne helped him out. I wonder what that interaction was. I wonder if it was like towards the end of the process and maybe Larner was banging his head against the desk like,
yeah,
how do I end this?
Just read my
like, was it
screenplay.
Towne's idea for that brilliant final scene, which is the scene
that scene is so good.
The scene that has stuck with me since government class is the last scene. That's the scene I've never forgotten.
For sure.
Which we'll talk about.
Well, and Larner was also a speechwriter for a senator for Eugene McCarthy.
Oh, okay.
So
that would make sense.
Yeah.
So the character of McKay was based on a real person, U.S. Senator John V. Tunney. Director Michael Ritchie worked for Tunney's successful campaign in the 1970 Senate election. Campaign manager Nelson Rising was an associate producer on the film. So this is based on a real person.
All right.
So it's interesting that Ritchie was part of the campaign. You think that maybe the screenwriter was to help him write the thing, but okay.
Right. I guess not.
So I thought that was interesting. I was like, is this based on someone of reality? Because I knew the character itself was fictionalized, but that makes sense to me. That's why I feel like Ritchie was able to capture that realism so well, because he was there seeing what was happening with Tunney with his own eyes just 2 years before.
Right. And it's a realistic film, and not that I've ever been part of a campaign like this, but it feels closer to actual politics than something that like Aaron Sorkin would write, for example. It's not very over the top. There's very little obvious misdeeds going on. There's kind of smaller, just little misdemeanors, one could say.
Yeah, what makes the film feel so real too is we get all these great little moments that I feel like another director would have just taken out and made it more streamlined, like that scene of him in the bathroom where he's peeing and that guy just comes up to him and scolding him. What does he say? I wrote it down. Like he's like swearing and stuff in his face as he's trying.
He's like, this is a perfect opportunity or something like that.
He's like, oh yeah, this is my chance. But yeah, he says, you're a piece of shit or something to his face. And he says, you're shit, McKay. Like as the guy's trying to pee.
Yeah. My God, that's a nightmare.
And it's like, it's the kind of scene that could have been taken out of the movie. You don't have to have it, but I feel like those little realistic moments, the camera handheld and kind of panning around Redford, and he's just like, oh my God, can I just finish here? And those are the moments that feel real,
That whole scene at the fairgrounds, I think, is really interesting because that's the scene where he also gets punched and another girl is trying to get him to sign his cleavage. So there's a lot of really extreme things going on in this scene in a way that feels odd in this really grounded movie. But I kind of liked that scene because his politics, yes, they're, I guess, on the more progressive end of things, but they're far from like radical. There's nothing insane in his politics. It's pretty boilerplate left-leaning politics, and it just kind of reminds me of people who get so riled up about, not to get too political, but it's this movie, people get so riled up about Joe Biden, who's like the most middle of the road politician I could think of, who are like calling him a socialist devil, and I'm like, I wish he was a socialist devil. Sounds great. But
yeah, that's another direction that they could have turned McKay into like this crazy leftist who speaks his mind and just says outrageous things, and that's what makes him so popular. I feel like there have been. I was trying to think this morning. There's been a movie about that, right? Like someone.
Oh my God, yes. Oh,
shoot, there's speaking of Warren Beatty, there's that movie Bulworth where doesn't he? I don't think he's running for president in that. I think he's running for like senator or something, and he's like,
but yeah,
like a rapper, or he's just something. Halle Berry's in it. But I'm like, what? I'm like, wasn't there a movie where it's like someone they just pull in off the street kind of a thing, and they speak their mind and they're outrageous and crazy? Or did we just live?
What is that?
Am I
just a reality?
Am I just thinking of what we live through?
Yeah,
in real life. Maybe that's it.
That's gonna drive me nuts because that definitely is a movie, and I cannot think of it right now.
Like someone who is like just not in politics at all, that they just pull in. I know I like it's on the tip of my I know I've seen this. Like in the last 10 years there was that story, and it was like a major actor. It was a man, and he was like.
Now I have.
If it comes to
drive me nuts. Yeah.
If we can't think of it. Tweet me at Film at 50 and tell me what we were trying to think of. But yeah, there's so many great little scenes in this movie. I love one of my favorite moments is when he's just trying to speak, and that kind of like claustrophobic TV room, like where they have all the cameras on him.
Yeah.
And
the boom mic.
And the boom mic comes down and he just starts laughing. And they're like, come on, we got to hurry up. One more take. Let's do this. And he's talking for about 20 seconds and then he just starts laughing. I think one of the hardest things to do, I've heard from actors, one of the hardest things to do is laugh when you're not, when to just like fake laugh on screen.
Sure.
And Redford does it very well in that scene. It feels genuinely authentic that he's busting up laughing.
No, it feels like we're watching an outtake. It feels really true.
Yeah. Which is why in high school, I made a short film where I needed an actor to laugh. And we did like 10 takes and everyone just sounded so stupid. And finally, I got him to laugh by just doing something off camera kind of a thing, like where I just said something. And he busted up laughing at what I said. And that was the take I used in the movie.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not acting. Sometimes it's just getting what's right. That and playing drunk are the two hardest things. So
playing drunk. Yeah.
It's never convincing.
I've heard, it's usually, I mean, I always go to Kristen Wiig and Bridesmaids on the plane.
Oh my God.
That's pretty good. But like in a dramatic film, when it
has to come off as realistic, it rarely feels right.
Because you can't, as the actor, get drunk for real, right? They don't typically do that, right?
Probably not. I mean, I'm sure some movies have actually done that, but
because I feel like it's hard to remember your lines and like where you're supposed to stand.
Stay focused.
You're just like this.
Yeah, not the best. But the secret to playing drunk, I've heard, is people who are drunk are always try to hide the fact that they're drunk.
Right.
So it can't be that. And that's the tricky thing, is that you're trying to play a suppressed emotion rather than the actual emotion, which is hard.
Yeah, exactly. Thankfully, Redford didn't have to play drunk in this movie, but that scene where he's laughing, I really enjoyed that. The debate scene's really great. Did you know who they wanted to play Crocker Jarman?
Wasn't it
turn it down?
Jimmy Stewart?
James Stewart.
Yeah.
That would have taken, I think that would have taken us out of the movie. I mean, we have a couple people we know, sort of, like, at least at the time, like in Peter Boyle and Melvin Douglas. But I feel like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it would have been okay, but I feel like he's too big of a name and a face that we know. It might have taken us out of the reality a little bit if it was James Stewart in that role. Or do you think it would have been okay?
Well, I think what he would have brought to the character that was kind of missing is with Jimmy Stewart, you immediately are endeared to him. You want to be his friend. You want to talk to him. And the guy they had to play Jarman is good. I just think there's a little bit something missing where it's kind of mystifying to me why voters would continue to vote for him besides if they're Republican. Yeah. Whereas if it was Stewart, I'd be like, well, look at the guy. Like, it's come on.
Oh, come on. It's Jimmy. Yeah, no, I see that. I just feel like it would have taken a little bit away from Redford. Like we would have been kind of focused more on Crocker Jarman. And something I liked in this movie, I don't think I mentioned before, is that they could have made him out to be really villainous and just being like this horrible human being. I kind of like that they didn't do that. That we really don't get his point of view very much. It's really all from McKay and the little times that we see Crocker Jarman. He's kind of a dick. Like he'll just like kind of brush Redford off. But he's not he's not in the back room like planning out like how do we
no, and he's never there's not much like bigotry on display, even the types of bigotry that were commonplace in 1972. The most like right-wing thing he says in the movie is he comes out as being very pro-life, but again, that's not
in the debate he talks about that. Yeah, but like they could have made him more villainous, and I was happy that they didn't. And it felt like the director and screenwriter were always trying to capture authenticity and make it like it's really happening, and that's what made this movie stand out from a lot of films I've looked at for the podcast over the last 2 to 3 months, outside of Godfather and Cabaret and What's Up Doc and some gems that I've looked at. Some of them, they just feel so stale and just like they feel like they're made in 1963, and I'm like the candidate feels like 72. Like it does not feel like it's something that would have been made 5 years before. Like it feels like it's of its time, which that's the kind of thing I'm looking for in these movies. Like
sure.
Feel like you're a 70s movie. We're in 72 now. Come on.
Well, the filmmaking feels very 70s. The subject and the way it's approached feels very of the time. It really does feel very time capsule in a good way.
And then we have some other nice moments. I like the cameo from Natalie Wood, which is that felt real too. Like you'd get like a well-known actor to come support his campaign as it's starting to get, more popular and more people are coming to his rallies and things. You'd get like a Natalie Wood to show up and give her support. And she hadn't been in a film for 3 years. Her last movie was Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice.
Oh yeah.
From '69, which was a huge hit. And I think she like got a lot of money for that. I don't know if she was a producer, but like she got like a piece of the back end or something.
Probably.
I want to say I read that once. Sense. And so I think she was able to take off a little time. She has kids and stuff. So I don't know if that was a favor she did for Robert Redford, because they had made 2 films together, 1965's Inside Daisy Clover and 1966's This Property is Condemned. She'd acted with Redford on 2 films. So maybe he called her and said, "You want to come do this little role for a day?"
Yeah.
She probably
just drive
said,
on
okay.
over. Probably wasn't far from her house. Well,
Natalie Wood for me.
The way she's introducing the movie is she just off screen. They say like, "Oh, Natalie Wood's here," and you think they're not going to show her, and then the camera turns a corner and there she is. It's like, "Oh, hi, Natalie."
Yeah, and I love that guy's like trying to get Redford's attention, and he's like, "No, I'm talking to Natalie Wood." Right
Natalie Wood, hello, thank you.
I think Natalie Wood is just one of the most stunningly gorgeous actresses to have ever lived.
Agree, especially in Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. Is that the title?
Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. Like she, I mean, she's going all the way back. She was a child actress in like Miracle on 34th Street.
Whoa, not much miracles happening on 37th Street.
Miracle on 34th Street, and then she's of course in Rebel Without a Cause in 55. And her career is so interesting because you really got to see kind of her progression from child actress to adult woman. And then you get to Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and like just, so talented, great actress, and just absolutely knockout beautiful.
Yeah. She's one of the few child actors that actually successfully made the jump to adult actor.
Yeah. So she is, she's going to be in some films of the 70s. I'm excited to get to some more of her work. It was nice to see her just briefly in this. Like, it's just an interesting choice to have her come in for that brief role. Let's see. So did you hear the story about when how they were promoting the candidate before it came out? What they did?
This is so interesting. I loved it.
This was my favorite
early viral marketing.
This was my favorite piece of trivia. So the candidate was released a month prior to the 1972 California presidential primary. Promotional sheets were put up in Southern California, resembling political posters. I'm assuming it's just the same ones you see in the movie. They had simply a photo of Robert Redford with the slogan, "McKay, the better way." McKay got multiple write-in votes in the election. So like people were seeing like, so does that mean like he wasn't famous enough for people to recognize that that's an actor? Like you think by 72 people would know the face of Robert Redford. They'd be like, that's not Jim McKay.
I guess so, but also people are stupid, so they've just fallen for it.
They were like, we want to find an alternate. Who is this handsome guy? Kind of looks like Robert Redford.
Right.
I'm going to do a write-in vote for him.
Oh my God. Makes me so mad.
You wouldn't have fallen for that?
No.
Like who would like who's an act like in 2022, like who's an actor who's semi well known that might have a movie like The Candidate coming out that they could actually pull it off for, that people wouldn't know he's an actor and they would give write-in.
Well, movie stars are not really a thing much anymore, so it could be anybody.
We only how many movie stars do we have now? Like who are actively working in films? What do you think? 10?
Oh my God. Who can sell a movie? Leo. That's it.
Sandra Bullock she did well with
Lost City.
Her new movie, The Lost City.
We applaud her. So of course she's taking a semi-retirement now, she said. So.
I love when Andrew Garfield just said in like an interview that he's taking a break, and then the whole internet blew up like, oh, he's retiring. And then if you read what he said, he's like, no, I've been working nonstop for the last 3 years. I mean, he's been in a lot. Like between May of 2021 and now, he's had 4 or 5?
Oh my God.
5. He's been in 5 things. Like,
well, he's been working like crazy since like 2016, where he had both those movies. Then he did Broadway.
Yeah. And then he was in Angels in America. And so, and then he was on The View, and I watched this interview, and he was like, no. I was talking like, I'm going to take like a month holiday. That's what I was saying. I would call God forbid he takes a month.
Oh my God. I saw him in Angels in America on Broadway.
Oh my gosh. What was that like?
The show was very good. I thought he was terrible.
You thought he was terrible? He won the
Terrible.
Tony.
I know. I disagree with the Tony.
So you were just like upset that night?
He was just. First of all, I love
He
that
was
play. Overacting, screaming the whole time, and it's a 9-hour show. So there's a lot of Andrew Garfield screaming.
You're not allowed to say anything negative about this man.
I'm so sorry.
He's perfection.
Breaking the rules.
Even in Mainstream, which I watched, was like just the most dreadful movie. Have you seen Mainstream?
Oh God, no.
So I'm making my YouTube video about Andrew Garfield, and I'm like, okay, so at the end, of course, I'm going to talk about his big 2021 films, and then I'm looking at his IMDb, and I see a 2020 Mainstream. I'm like, oh, what's this? Is like a cameo in something, and he's like basically the lead, and I'm like, I have never heard of this movie. Like, I didn't even know what it was, and I'm like, how does a movie with Andrew Garfield, directed by Gia Coppola, how does that just completely blindside? Like I didn't even hear about it, so I finally watched it. I'm like, oh, it's because it's not very good.
Well, yeah, movies like trying. That I don't watch them because one day I'm gonna die and my time is finite.
Your time is finite.
Yeah. Not saying my time is valuable
that.
because I do watch a lot of bad things, but
I mean, you did watch Vampire Circus.
I did watch Vampire Circus because this little podcast made me. So
hey, at least I got you a better movie this time, right?
No, I had fun. Yeah. And this actually is probably the best movie you've had me on so far to talk about. So
this is the best one. This is the third time you've been on, right? You were on for Sometimes a Great Notion and Vampire Circus. Yeah, this is the best one. This still the best scene of the three movies is that one and Sometimes a Great Notion.
Absolutely. Yeah, the drowning scene.
There's not like one, I would say like the best scene of this is the last 2 minutes. Do you want to talk about the ending of this now?
Yes, and I have another scene I wanted to point out.
But yeah, let's talk about
the ending scene. I thought was pretty fantastic. It's very
you just
chaotic.
You get the sense as a first-time viewer of this movie, like you get the sense that he's gonna win. Like it's not gonna end with him losing and then going home with his wife, and like it just feels like why make this 2-hour movie if it's not going to be like what does he do after he actually wins? And so he wins, and they're like pulling him down this hallway. And he's clearly just almost in a panic. And he's like, what is happening right now? Get me out. And he grabs Peter Boyle. He's like, fine, I need to talk to you.
Yep.
And they go in an elevator, like they go down or up, and they go down another hallway and then another room. And Boyle says, okay, you have about 60 seconds. What is it? And he just sits and Redford sits down and he doesn't say anything. He's like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. And then you hear the commotion in the hallway of everyone coming in, and you almost can't hear Redford saying it because the noise is growing, and Boyle's kind of like, what? And he just says it. He says it what, twice or 3 times? He says, what do we do now? Maybe
that moment is why I got a Best Sound nomination.
Yeah, I love that shot. He says it, I think, up close. What do we do now? And then as the people are pouring in, we get that wide shot of the hotel room or whatever it is, and you see him on the bed, and he's very far from the camera. And he's just saying it just like, what do we do now?
Right.
And it's such a great, it's so beautifully just like cut together, and just the vibe and the pacing of that last minute. I just really, it kind of reminds me of the ending of Lost in Translation a little bit. Like,
okay. Yeah. Where you don't hear what they say.
Don't hear what they say. And it's kind of like the camera's kind of far away, but you know, it means something really important.
Right. And you don't see that a lot in movies, this thing that they depict in The Candidate, where he kind of mouths the words, but you can kind of hear it. You don't get that kind of indecision when it comes to both sound and performance. You don't really see that kind of moment in life put in movies, even though it happens all the time. How often can you not make out what somebody's saying because the room's too loud?
But I feel like a lot of movies, would end with him winning, and then it'd be like this big, glorious, sweeping music, and like he did it, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna try to do good, and it would, that kind of a predictable ending, I don't think would have been that strong. I like that we're back with the guy we met at the beginning of that kind of panic, and like, wait, okay, I won. What do we do now? Like what I came into this for has changed, and I don't really even know who I am right now. And how do we move forward? Yeah, I think is the right way to end this.
Or it would be really cynical, and he would like rise to triumph in a really frightening way. Something really over the top.
It just ends with a close up of him like laughing, like snarling, really like a vampire.
I mean, Vampire. What was that movie called?
Vampire Circus.
Circus. Right?
You were my first guest
this movie
to
had
put
less
on
vampires.
You were my first guest to put on the film you were coming on for. And you couldn't remember the title.
Well, who could?
I think I had this. I think I just was like, oh, it's vampire something, and I went on Tubi and I typed in vampire enter, and it'll be one of the top 5, right? And I'm like, there are so many movies with the word vampire on here.
A lot of vampires, but only one movie where
Speaking of, we only have so many days on this planet. Like, if you want to really just waste your time, go on Tubi and just search the word vampire. You got a month's worth of movies, right?
Hey, look, listen. I've watched worse horror movies around Halloween time just to get in the spirit.
So and another part of what's so great is that he's pulled out of the room and then the door slams and then the camera stays on the empty hotel room for 5-6 seconds before we fade and then roll credits. So you're just left with this. You're not left with a sense of like accomplishment or like great things are going to happen. It's like, oh, like it leaves you kind of thinking at the end, which I love when movies do that.
Yeah, it was a very well-directed scene for a movie that is overall well-directed, but again, doesn't really make a show of its direction. And this moment is understated, but it's still thematically resonant in a way that I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah. And you said you have one other scene you want to talk about. What's the other scene we have not mentioned?
Yeah, the one scene I mentioned earlier as being the one moment where it gets very like cinematic is where he's giving a speech in a mall, and it's not a good crowd. They're booing him and shouting the opposing candidate's name at him, and the mic cuts out, and there's a moment where it gets really close in on Redford's face and he looks like panicked and uneasy, and he's looking around, and you see his point of view looking at different people who are looking down literally on him from above, and the camera is like zooming in on the people, and it felt very noticeable in its direction in a way that the rest of the movie is not. But I liked it because it put us really in his mind space. You felt similarly overwhelmed as a viewer in the way that he probably felt.
That's a great point. Yeah, this is not a director who's overly stylish with the way he's filming the movie, but there are little moments like where he's clearly like he's doing things with the camera to kind of put us in his head and show us kind of the chaos and some of the panic he's feeling. And yeah, so that's really, really great scene too.
Well, it's one of those movies where the obvious absence of style, or at least the absence of obvious style, is the style. I'm thinking of similar movies like Spotlight does something similar where it feels like there's not a ton of heavy direction going on, but that is the direction, is to just play the movie as is. Right.
Yeah. And some of these like journalism movies, political movies, it feels appropriate to have it feel kind of fly on the wall, camera roaming, and it usually feels like the right choice. Like if this had been a lot of camera locked off on sticks and things, I don't think the candidate would come to life in the way it does. So that I thought worked really well. Like even in 72, I don't think there's a lot of handheld camera in most movies. Like it's usually pretty, unless it's like a lower budget indie or something. Like I feel like even in 72, there's still a polish to a lot of movies that thankfully you don't see as much in the candidate. You have more of a roaming handheld camera throughout almost the entire movie, which is nice.
Yeah, we're just on the dawn of like the Steadicam happening, so like it's a very specific time in cinematography.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the growth of so many great directors. So it's so exciting, like to be talking about years where a lot of our great directors still working to this day are just getting their start. Oh yeah, we just talked about Boxcar Bertha and Martin Scorsese, and of course we talked about Francis Ford Coppola, who had directed a few things before The Godfather, but that was kind of his breakthrough. And so just like a really exciting time for cinema here. And anything else? But before we get to, I did want to talk about the screenplay category. Anything you didn't like in the candidate? Any criticisms? Like any, like I just wrote like one thing I thought was maybe could have been improved, but anything that you didn't like?
So my only critique, and this may have been on me, but it felt kind of like the movie was telling us how we should feel about his candidacy rather than showing it, because there's a lot of moments where it stays so locked in on the Redford character that it becomes hard to, and I mean, as I'm saying it out loud, it feels intentional to put us in his headspace again, but it's kind of hard to tell how the things he's saying are resonating, because they're telling him behind the scenes, you know, you're coming off as too radical, too leftist. And then he starts changing his message, but it's not very obvious what is changing exactly or how it's affecting. It kind of happens pretty quickly. And again, that as I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing that this is very likely intentional, but it did kind of create a bit of, I don't want to say confusion, but it made me feel a little bit unsteady.
That's a good point. Yeah. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't beat you over the head with a hammer of how the movie wants you to feel, but
no,
there are a few scenes where like it does seem to go a little bit too far in that direction, where I do want it to just be a little bit more like keep the viewer apart from what he's feeling a little bit more. But I mean, I like the episodic nature of the movie. I feel like if it had been more just like streamlined and we had like longer scenes, and I don't know, I liked how it moved along a lot faster than most films I've looked at for the podcast the last couple months. Like it moved along really well. So I like that. I would say, like, I felt like the relationship with his wife was kind of underdeveloped. Did you feel that at all? I don't know if the movie needed I felt like the movie needed like one or two better scenes with the wife just to get a sense of her. I never got a sense of her. She was very one note.
Sure.
Not to say that the movie's about her, but there's enough with her. Like there's a bedroom scene towards the end. I'm like, I don't really understand this relationship. I don't really know her. I felt like the movie needed one or two scenes with the wife where they had like a conversation where, I don't know. I just felt like something was lacking in that department.
Sure. I think though, like my criticism that probably was intentional, to like really make us feel like we are with him, because in the same way that the movie kind of forgets about her, the character kind of forgets about her.
True. Yeah.
But yeah,
like we're introduced to her like pretty early on, and there's chunks of the movie where we don't see her at all. I just felt like we didn't need to have like a scene of her by herself or something, but just like I felt like her character could have been like it could have been improved a little bit more. But yeah, let's talk about the best original screenplay category. I'm like, so this is an interesting choice to be the winner. And then I looked at the other nominees and I went, oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he went,
part of it is this is not going up against like a Cabaret or Godfather. This is going up against Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which is a wonderful film. I'm excited to watch that again and talk about that in September, is I think when that came out in the United States, or somewhere around there. And then it was up against Lady Sings the Blues, which I don't know a whole lot about. That's Diana Ross got a nomination for Best Actress, right? Is that a biopic?
Yes, it is. It's Billie Holiday.
Billie Holiday. Okay.
It's an okay movie. Diana Ross is pretty great in it. I know a lot of people think she maybe should have won over Liza Minnelli, which I don't agree with, but she's very good in it. But the screenplay is not what I would take away from that movie at all. But what do I know? Yeah,
this is the year of it's two African-American nominations in Best Actress, right? Because the other one is Cicely Tyson for Sounder. Is that right?
It's the first time it happens, and it's only the second time it's happened ever, because it happened again last year with Andra Day and Viola Davis for Ma Rainey.
That was the second time that had ever happened.
Yeah, and both times there was a nominee playing Billie Holiday.
That's right.
Which is
Andra Day played Billie Holiday. That was another wild actress. It's like to think there's been 2 years of kind of like very unpredictable Best Actress races, which makes it more exciting.
Or at least years where it was undoubtedly the most unpredictable acting category.
Yeah, I would say even in some ways last year was even more unpredictable than the recent one with Chastain. Like the last one, it was like someone new won, Andra Day won Golden Globe. Carey Mulligan won Critics' Choice. Viola Davis won SAG.
And then
who won BAFTA?
Frances
McDormand won BAFTA.
And then she went on to
win the Oscar.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was wild.
That's the wildest category I've ever seen ever in my almost 20 years of following.
Were you predicting McDormand to win the
Oscar?
No,
I was predicting Viola Davis.
Oh, okay. I was predicting Mulligan.
SAG. You were predicting who?
I was predicting Carey Mulligan because her movie was up for picture. It was going to win screenplay, and she was nominated for an education, and she had never won. Viola Davis had won. McDormand had won. Andra Day, I just thought the movie was too small.
Yeah, and she was fairly unknown as an actor. And looking back, the Frances McDormand win makes sense because I'm sure it was spread very thin, but the movie was obviously winning Best Picture.
Movie was winning Best Picture.
Right, and Best Director. But
which makes sense in hindsight, but I just did not think they would give it to her again. I'm like, that's not gonna happen.
I agree. The second it happened, I was like, of course it was her. And I feel like as time goes on, people will look at that race and be like, well, everybody was predicting Frances McDormand, of course. And I just want to be like, no, nobody knew what was gonna happen.
No, my second choice after Mulligan would have been Viola Davis. because she had not won lead yet. And I was like, they didn't nominate her movie in picture, Viola Davis.
Yeah.
So that was my maybe it's not getting that.
And that's the tricky thing, because then I assume like everybody else was, you were predicting Chadwick Boseman to win best actor.
No, I predicted Anthony Hopkins.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well, congratulations. You're very smart. I
remember why.
Not smart, and I predicted Chadwick Boseman. But then you're predicting a best actor actress pair winner for a non-best picture nominee, which again, looking back, that should have been a bigger warning sign to me. But
I think didn't Anthony Hopkins win BAFTA?
He only won BAFTA.
BAFTA. I think part of it was that was the last picture nominee I watched about a week before the ceremony, and Anthony Hopkins was so good. I was like, he's gonna win.
No, when you watch it, it's undeniable. He's
like
amazing.
it's undeniable. I was like, are enough people watching this? Because this is on another level. Like this is an incredible performance. One of the best performances of the last 10 years.
I agree.
I was like, I think he could do it if enough.
It's one of the few good best actor wins of this century so far. That category is just rotten otherwise.
It was sad that the way the show ended and he didn't have a speech, he wasn't there. But then he came back for this one to give that Oscar to Jessica Chastain. That was nice to see. That was very nice. Come back. Yes. And what does he say? Let's all just live
peace
in
and love and quiet, which is something I try to remember every day of my life.
Yeah. So the other two nominations were of very kind of obscure films. We get Murmur of the Heart, which is a foreign film. I want to say
it's French by Louis
Malle.
Louis Malle. Yeah,
Louis Malle. And then Young Winston, which I don't know anything about.
No.
Do we know anything about Young Winston?
Not the foggiest.
There's not. So none of these four films was in the picture, right? These other four nominations.
None of the five. None of them at all.
So I'm like, Murmur of the Heart and Young Winston are not going to win. Lady Sings the Blues, I think that's more of a showcase for Diana Ross. I don't think that would have been a clear. So the only one that could have beat the candidate, I would say, is Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which is a great movie, but it's a foreign film. I don't know how many foreign films were winning screenplay awards at the Oscars in the 70s. I don't know if that happens in the 70s, but it just seems like the candidate is just the clear
right. And and when you look at the best screenplay or best original screenplay winners of the 70s, it really does make sense with them. You know, these are all, for the most part, pretty grounded, pretty concept-y, which this movie is. It is low energy in terms of its filmmaking, but it is definitely high concept. You know, it's about it's a log line that you can easily spit out in 5 seconds, and it has. I think the structure of the screenplay is what's impressive, rather than like the dialogue. You know, it's not something like Annie Hall or Network where you're going to remember all these zingers, all these lines. There's no really memorable quotes from this movie, but I think the structure of it and the overall character building is really strong, and that's why I think
it's a worthy winner. I think if there was a Godfather in the category or something, there's no way the candidate would have won. I think it was part of it was a matter of just it's the clear one of the five that most people would be voting for.
I'm pretty sure if any of the best picture nominees were actually adapted or were original rather than adapted, they would have gotten in, because the adapted screenplay race, on the other hand, is 4 out of the 5 nominees there are best picture nominees.
Like so sometimes the winner is undeserved, and you're like, oh well, it's because the better script was in the other screenplay category. Right. They didn't have the competition. Right. So sometimes that happens.
Yeah. It's funny though, because I feel like we are now in an era in our current day where we will never again see a best screenplay go to a non-best picture nominee. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it's ever going to happen again.
So the recent one was Coda and Belfast one, right?
Yeah. There hasn't been a non-best picture screenplay winner since Eternal Sunshine, I want to say. That might be wrong, but that was...
Oh, right. Eternal Sunshine won. That was not up for picture. That was only up for... Was it just actress and screenplay? Yep. It didn't get editing?
Nope.
That movie should have gotten edited.
Well, if it came out now, it would definitely be a best picture nominee, just by the fact that it won best.
Well, it came out in March. I think if that movie had opened in December, I think Jim Carrey might have been nominated, but because it was so early in the year, or maybe not, I don't know. I'm a big Jim Carrey defender.
I understand.
I wish he had one nomination. I love him so, but so yeah, that's interesting. And so this is a much better winner of the original screenplay Oscar versus the year before, which went to Patty Chayefsky for The Hospital, Have you seen The
Okay.
Hospital?
I have not seen The Hospital. No.
Which was really disappointing as a huge
really?
fan of Network, which won him his second Oscar for original screenplay for 76. Network is, if not in my top 10, it's definitely in my top 20 favorite films of all time. That
Sure, yeah.
76 is just such an astonishing year. You have
Oh my God,
Network
love
and
that
All the
year.
President's Men. Same
And
year.
Rocky. I love
And Rocky.
I am a Rocky boy. I love Rocky.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'd like Rocky more if it, if it didn't beat those two movies for Best Picture. But yeah, and I'm just a huge fan of Chayefsky's work. I've read some of his like TV scripts, and like he's just so talented. And then I said, oh my gosh, he won another Oscar for screenplay for the Networks. George C. Scott, Diana Rigg. I'm like this, and it fell flat for me. My guests liked it more. I just struggled the whole movie.
Weird.
It was like a lot of long network-like monologues that just weren't that of interest and weren't delivered very well by the actors, I thought, and it just felt weird. And it didn't get in for picture nomination or anything, but it won the original screenplay Oscar. So this is a thing that's happening in the 70s.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't get in for picture, but it wins screenplay.
Yeah.
I think this is a better win for The Candidate. I would, if it was The Candidate versus The Hospital, I'd vote for The Candidate.
Sure. Yeah. Of this year's nominees, I haven't seen Discreet Charm. I've only seen Lady Sings the Blues and The Candidate. So I would definitely give it to The Candidate over that movie.
It's a tough one. It's one of my top 10 foreign film favorites is Discreet Charm. I saw it in college. I took a European history film class, and it was my favorite film we watched that whole semester. And it's never escaped my mind. It's just such a wonderful movie by Louis Buñuel, my favorite film of his. And so I'll watch it again. It's I think I'm doing that episode in September, so probably August-ish. I'll watch that, and we'll see if it holds up. But that might be my choice here over The Candidate if it holds up as well as I hope it does. But I think Candidate's right there at the top.
Yeah, I think that's what most film lovers would say now. That probably is looked at as what should have been Discreet Charm's Oscar.
Yeah, but
I think also because people don't really talk about The Candidate very much anymore. It's not really.
Like I feel like if you're having a discussion about Robert Redford, it might come up. But this is probably not one of the top 5 films of his people would know, right?
Definitely not.
I think your go-tos are Butch Cassidy, The Sting,
All the President's Men,
All the President's Men
he's directed.
And then Ordinary People he directed, didn't star in. Quiz Show he didn't star in. What do you think is his most famous film he acted in of the last 20 years? Like he was in a lot of things. I don't know if there's like one that stands out as like his most
one of the
famous?
Marvel movies.
Yeah. Well, like
Avengers.
Okay, so like Captain America, the Winter Soldier, maybe.
Right. Much like all actors now.
Like outside of Marvel, I don't know if he is in one since like 2002 that's like that people are talking about today that much.
People really like All Is Lost.
Oh, All Is Lost.
I thought it was just okay, but I think he's very good in it. So that's probably up there.
No, that's one of my favorite films of his. I just don't know if a lot of people saw that one. That's on my list. I really love it.
Sure. The general audience, no, but people who,
you didn't like watching maybe. Robert Redford on a boat for 2 hours by himself.
What's the problem?
He needed some company.
He needed like an Iron Man or something to get people really interested. Some sort of Iron Man.
He needed a hunky man,
right,
with him as an older Redford's questioning his sexuality.
Of course,
on the boat, as they're trying to survive.
Pitch it to Hollywood.
And then it was also The Candidate was also nominated for Best Sound. It lost to Cabaret. Shocker.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Cabaret, which swept, it won 7.
I think
Oscars.
8.
Did it win 8?
Yeah, Cabaret won 8.
Cabaret won 8. It was nominated for what? 10? 9,
yes,
10?
Both The Godfather and Cabaret were nominated for 10.
So Cabaret is in the history books, right? It's the record for most wins of a movie that did not win Best Picture. So it was 8 wins. Oh, right, because Gravity got 7. So you're right, and did not win Picture. 12 Years a Slave won.
Right.
So
that was pretty.
You're right. Yeah. So Cabaret got 8 wins and did not win Picture. And I think Godfather only won 3.
It won 3. It won the 3 that Coda won.
It won screenplay, actor, and picture. So you just compared The Godfather to Coda.
I sure did.
Let's put that on a billboard somewhere. Cody Dericks. Next.
It's like The Godfather.
Coda is like The Godfather. Cody Derricks. Yeah, like,
Suddenly
oh,
kicked off
okay.
of Twitter.
Oh my
Weird.
gosh. Why is my Twitter not working this morning? It's not letting me
Strange.
in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Cabaret winning
Coda.
Best Sound makes sense, even though I probably would give it to The Godfather.
I don't understand why it's even nominated for sound.
I'm not kidding. I think it is that one moment.
At the
I
end.
wouldn't be surprised though. This is a time where sound is really changing in Hollywood. You know, you get I believe THX and Dolby are around the corner. And I wonder if there are maybe some technological advancements we didn't know about that made capturing dialogue.
Maybe
in,
the dialogue overlapping is something they were looking
the
at.
overlapping dialogue, or the scenes where there's like a crowd and the sound cuts through. There's the scene with the mic that's broken. That's like there's feedback. So there's some sound stuff going
it's
on.
like I'm trying to picture like Academy voters, and they're like they're watching the candidate, and they're like, sound.
Oh yeah, the sound.
Have you guys seen the candidate? Like
Have you heard the candidate?
Don't even think about seeing it. Listen. Listen to
Watch
the
it
movie
with your ears.
Just don't even just shut your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this year though, there's not much I probably would nominate that stands out for its sound.
The other nominees were Godfather and Poseidon Adventure was in there,
which makes a lot of sense. And then Butterflies Are Free, which I haven't
Butterflies
seen.
Are Free,
but
which I believe is a winner for Best Supporting Actress.
Correct.
Eileen Atkins.
Eileen Heckart.
Eileen Heckart. And that is the film we're talking about in July. That is coming up. We're coming up on that 50-year anniversary release that came out in, I believe, July of 72. So I don't know much about that. I'm just a big Goldie Hawn fan. I'm a Goldie Hawn completist.
Oh, yeah. Who among us is?
And she is the lead of that film. I have not seen it before.
I do wonder why Lady Sings the Blues didn't get a Best Sound nomination, because that's all about singing and music, much like Cabaret. Obviously, it's one of those like musical biopics that isn't a musical in the traditional sense, but it is full of songs.
No, that movie is about its screenplay.
Of course, so the sparkling screenplay of Lady Sings the Blues.
So so the candidate did not get a whole lot of award. Like, it didn't get anything at the Globes, which is kind of surprising to me. You think that Redford is a big enough name and the movie was strong enough, you think he would have gotten in for a lead actor nomination or something, but he didn't. So the only other things it got a top 10 films winner from the National Board of Review, and it won the Writers Guild Award for Best Drama Written Directly for the Screen.
All right.
That seems to correspond a lot in the 70s. Like, if it wins WGA, if it's one of the two winners for that, like, it goes on to win the Oscar. It's usually correspond.
That makes sense. And I wonder what let me look at the nominees for that, because I wonder if the WGA nominees were similar to the Oscars. Because if it wins the WGA, then that probably makes it pretty easy to call, even though there was not a lot of there weren't as many precursors back then as there are now.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, it was completely different. All the other four nominees are completely different movies.
Okay, what were the nominees in that category at the WGA?
I've only heard of one of these movies.
Okay, what are they?
Images, Robert Altman. And then the other ones are called Bad Company, the Culpeper Cattle Company, and the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid.
So is it? Did you get nominated if you had the longest title?
Right. Well, two of them are Westerns.
Okay.
With really silly titles. And then one is Altman, like I said. And the Bad Company is also a Western. So it's 3 Westerns.
Bad Company, I tried to watch. So outside of the podcast, the movies that I'm not going to talk about, I do try to find time, like on the weekend and stuff, and I'll try to watch, like, if not every week, one every other week. I try to just watch a 72 film. And I tried to watch Bad Company maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was pretty slow. I gave it about half an hour, and I give it. All right.
Never mind.
I'm like, if I had to watch this for the podcast, I'd finish it, but I'm like, eh. So, and then I'm like, if I ever find one, just a treasure that I think is wonderful, then I'll fit it in. Like, I'll do an episode. That's also sense. The idea. But I haven't found one yet. Bad Company was not the one. Jeff Bridges, one of my favorites, and if he's in something, I'll take a look. But that one did not stand out. So my last thing is that the movie did well critically. New York Times gave it a rave. One of the few good, truly funny American political comedies ever made. Gene Siskel gave it 3.5 stars. Roger Ebert loved it. Said it. The director brought a sharply observant documentary realism to the movie. And Variety gave it a big rave. So yeah, critics at the time really loved this movie.
Well, the funny thing is, one of those critics called it a comedy, and I kept seeing it listed as a comedy online, and I I don't think it's very funny. I mean, maybe it's just because the way politics are now, it kind of feels like a premonition that we should have been paying attention to. But it feels like something like Network feels like more like a comedy than this. Like this, I don't find it.
That's a
very
good
funny.
point. Yeah, what is really funny? And I mean, you have him laughing. There's like a sense of humor to the movie. It's not.
I think it's a comedy in quotation marks in the sense that it's a satire, kind of like when Get Out got nominated for Best Comedy at the Golden Globes because it's a satire, even though it's not funny.
Did Get Out get a comedy nom at the Globes?
Get Out.
What?
We all laughed.
It's like that year that DiCaprio won at the Globes for Wolf of Wall Street, and he was up against all these Titan actors in what I thought were mostly dramas, and they were all up for comedy. It was like Nebraska, and it was Her, and like these movies that
Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The movie that has depressed me more than any other movie. I love that movie, but it bummed me out.
And it's like the Wolf of Wall Street, the scene where he's trying to get into his car is maybe the funniest scene of any movie in 2013. So it is funny at times, but it's so when a movie has a mixture of both, it's hard to say it's a comedy. I don't know.
Something like The Martian.
Didn't it win the picture award for best comedy? That best hilarious comedy.
Yep. The Martian.
Do we know the update? Are the Globes coming back, or
I don't know? I think they'll never die. Even if like last year they tweet out their awards every year, they'll always be around. And for as troubling and problematic and awful as they are, I do appreciate their messiness. So I hope they stick around.
Yeah. I mean, just nominating dramas in the comedy categories. Yeah. What was the Michelle Williams being nominated, and she won for My Week with Marilyn.
Oh yeah, well that was all Weinstein. They put like an extra song in there,
and I can't remember who gave her the trophy, but like he said, like, and Michelle Williams for the hilarious comedy My Week with Marilyn.
Oh yeah, it's like
well, we got to get them talking. We need a speech to push them forward to maybe winning the Oscar. So let's just push them into the wrong category and get them a win, right?
So shameless.
That's what's most important. Although it is nice to anytime see Michelle Williams win something. I love her so much.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I haven't put a lot of thought into the upcoming year. I don't even know what's really coming out, but she is in the new Spielberg film.
Yeah, I can't start to think about the next year until like August. But I agree. I think could be her year if it wasn't for Viola Davis being put in the wrong category.
I'm not a good
already.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm not a good Oscar YouTuber because I haven't done that video yet of what could win next year.
You don't have to. That's okay.
I can't go there, Cody.
No.
I'm like at least August.
I'm still traumatized from this last year, so I can't even think about it yet.
Like I'm thinking like once a month I'm going to review a film and then I'll talk in the end about like what it could get in. I did that for the Batman a few weeks ago. But I can't do like what's going to be nominated for picture. Like I'm not going there yet.
I don't have my brain is so small and I don't have room for it for that.
In terms of movies that have been released so far, what do you think? Do you have any ideas like what could get nominated?
I mean,
outside of the Batman? Like, do you think Everything Everywhere All at Once will get in for screenplay?
I
feel like that is a shot
for some of the wackier stuff, like the costumes and the editing is really showy. So as long as people keep the drum beat going, it can happen. But screenplay could definitely happen. The thing about predicting Oscars this far in advance is you don't have a full layout of the what the competition is going to look like, because it's easy to say, well, that should be nominated, and like, yes, it should, but who knows what else will be up for the awards, so that's what makes it tough.
I think the two animated films that have come out probably be in The Bad Guys and Turning Red.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably
that's animation is always one of those categories that doesn't matter when it came out. As long as you're a Disney or Pixar movie, you'll get nominated.
Raya and The Last Dragon got in. That came out in March of 21.
Sure did.
So anything else you want to say about the movie before I come to my last question, which for every guest is like, how does the film hold up today? What would it be like if made today?
I've covered all my notes.
Okay.
I just think I just thought it was a really canny look at politics and how What I liked also is about how it shows how politicians can just be fed talking points, and even if it isn't actually their ideology, which is what you would in a perfect world want your candidates to be espousing and running on, but it just shows how, you know, their team can say, you got to say this. It's not about what you actually believe or want to do when you get the job. It's about saying what the public wants to hear.
Exactly. Yeah, this is one of the like better political films I've seen. I'd give it a solid, I think like if not an 8 out of 10, it's definitely a 7.5 out of 10. I don't think it's a perfect film. I didn't have a lot of criticism to say for it. Part of it is there's been so much political discussions and things we've seen in 2022. It's hard to look at a film like this and not feel like we've seen it before. But in the context of the year it came out, I do think it was a very original film of its time. So yeah, it's a really strong film. If you're a Redford fan, if you're not a big Redford fan, I still think it's worth a look for sure.
Yeah, I also give it a 7. I think it's I think it's a good time. It's not the most exciting film, if I can say it like that, but you don't expect it to be, you know.
There's not a car chase.
Right. That's fine.
That would have been very out of place in them. Like if Crocker was like chasing after McKay in his car, trying to
but to our earlier point, that's part of the movie's effectiveness is in how run of the mill and every day the whole thing is painted. You know, to these people, it's a job. It's like any other job.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really great. If they were to remake this today, do you think this could be a movie now? Like The Candidate, like if you got a great leading actor and they did it like a Senate run in 2022, like what would that look like?
As it is, you could not make a movie like this because part of it relies on the audience being, and I think this is why it was maybe viewed as a comedy at the time. The audience has to be kind of taken aback by his actions or surprised or even like perversely amused by his ability to change his tactics and his opinions just to suit what's being told to him. But I think nowadays you couldn't get away with that because people would be like, well, this is just a documentary. Candidates don't even make a secret anymore of changing their opinions and you know, lobbyists changing who they're voting for and what they're voting about. So I don't think as it is you can make something like this, but I do think that a movie about politics that looks into a race is always interesting, especially if you're going to paint it as this guy didn't even want to run for the position because, you know, I feel like there's a few politicians you can say that about now. I feel like there's been a recent president you can say that about now who didn't even seemingly want to have the job they were applying for when they started running for office and then tumbled into an election. So
you could see, like, you could imagine that night when Trump won, him turning into someone and being like, what do we do now?
Oh, I guarantee that actually happened. I'm not kidding. I think that probably actually happened. Like, was not expecting it. What do we do now?
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Now I have to run the country. Okay, what do we do now? So it's like it's hard to imagine something that's really fresh and exciting on this subject matter today. I almost feel like it would have to be a period film in some ways to make it. Like, so didn't Hugh Jackman do a period film, The Front Runner?
That was going to be one of my recommendations.
Okay. So I'll leave it for a moment.
Talk about it later.
But some of these actors, like, I mean, but that movie wasn't like a big hit. It didn't get Jackman like an Oscar nomination. No. So some actors, Sandra Bullock, who I mentioned before, or Branda's Crisis was maybe her biggest flop of her entire career, a political comedy that came and went. And so it's a tricky kind of subgenre. Like, if it's not handled right, if it's not marketed well, like, people don't, especially in today's society, people aren't really gearing up for a political movie right now. So
no, the closest we got was that recent movie, The Report.
With Annette Bening and Adam Driver.
Adam Driver, right, about the CIA torture report, I believe it was, in the mid 2000s, and that was technically a period piece, but it was not a far period piece, and I think that's probably the closest we get to something like a movie like The Candidate. And I really like that movie, but it didn't really make much of an impression in the general sense.
Yeah, I watched it because I'm a huge Annette Bening fan. I'm always like looking for her next. I'm always looking for her next Oscar nomination. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, it almost happened. She got the Globe nom.
I'm like, she's playing a real life like Olympic swimmer or something. Like, she's like in production right now on a biopic kind of a movie where she's the lead. I'm like, come on, Annette.
All right. It could happen.
Come on.
Poor Annette.
But
I don't think I'd ever actually give her an award so far of her nominations. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
But I
well,
do like
as
her.
Glenn Close has proven, it's not just like if you get to your 5th or 6th or 7th, that doesn't mean
Doesn't
like,
matter.
then they'll give it to you. So I'm gonna do a video on her this summer about her Oscar, and I'm like, that's gonna be like an hour long.
Yeah, you got a lot of material there, buddy.
Every single week I get comments like, when are you doing Glenn Close? When are you doing Glenn Close?
Oh my God.
I know I have to
when are you going to tell us about how much she's lost?
I have to talk about her. Oh, I'm waiting for the summer, so I'm not teaching and I'm on break, so because I'm gonna need time.
Yeah, that's a project. That's
gonna be a project dissertation of my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video. All right, that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's the Divine double feature. So is The Frontrunner your choice there, or is that?
Yes, that was, it jumped out right away to me.
Okay.
How similar The Frontrunner feels to this. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jason Reitman used it as an inspiration, because that movie is also very Altman-esque. It's a lot of overlapping dialogue and long. The opening scene especially is this long take that follows different people's conversations that feels
right.
It's like, it might as well have been a Robert Altman film just for that one scene.
And that's the 1988 presidential race or Senate race?
That's a great question. Hang on.
I saw it. I remember I watched it. It didn't really stick in my mind that well. But yeah, I liked Hugh Jackman in it. Wasn't it? It was at the end of the 80s.
It was the 88 Democratic presidential.
Okay, that went
primary.
That went to Dukakis.
Right.
Okay.
And then he lost to Bush. Obviously.
The primary.
Right. So he didn't even make the primary.
Right.
Yeah. I don't love this movie, but I think it's actually better than it got. It got pretty quickly dismissed, and it was obviously a big flop. But I thought overall it was pretty effective in the way it showed that like nobody in this movie is on their best behavior, but it all got put on this one guy who obviously didn't do the right things. But it's just interesting that he became the focus of all that attention. I also Hugh Jackman is not an actor I like ever. I just don't like his style. I find him very, and I say this as a former theater kid, I find him very theater kiddie. But I think this is his best performance because it's taking all the things that he uses as his movie star personality, which is like his extreme charm and his like, he wants everybody to like him, and it uses that to kind of develop this character, and it's made into like part of the characterization is the things that Hugh Jackman is known for in real life, and I think that's really smart. So yeah, I think that's a good pairing.
Yeah, and it's good too because I don't think a lot of people will have seen The Frontrunner too.
Right. Yeah. Well, I remember before it came out, I among other people were thinking it would be like the big movie of the Oscars that year. It felt on paper, so perfect. Like
Reitman, Jackman, political drama.
Yep.
November release, was it November?
Yeah, November. Yep.
November.
So perfect timing, but it premiered at Telluride and just got immediately dismissed. So
it's so crazy how often it comes down to that Telluride or Toronto premiere, and within a week, it's like decided.
Never mind. Yep. Well, you damn yourself when you name your movie The Frontrunner, because then the jokes write themselves.
That's true. I didn't even think about
obvious.
that. Yeah. So that's a good choice. I went with a movie that came out just a few months later. I went with Long Shot. Did you see Long Shot?
Oh yeah, I did see Long Shot.
A nice, like a political, kind of more of a romantic comedy. It's a little bit different in tone, I would say, than The Candidate. But if I was thinking, what's a really good political film of the last 5 to 10 years that I enjoyed? And that almost made my top 10 list of 2019. It was like my number 12.
I really liked it. I thought it was definitely, and this is not saying much because these don't get made very often anymore, definitely the best romantic comedy we've had in a long time. And I thought both the leads were great, especially Charlize Theron.
Charlize Theron is so believable.
She does.
And, and it doesn't seem like the kind of pairing that would work with her and Seth Rogen. And it totally does. And like, you believe their past, like I believe she was his babysitter, right? When they were younger.
Yes.
And they knew each other before. Now he's writing for her as she's the Secretary of State. He's her speechwriter. And they just have this really interesting chemistry and this very well written comedy. And it was just like, it was one of the standouts of that spring season. I really I saw enough. Like, I don't think I was going to see it in the theater. And then I saw enough people saying it was really good. And I was like, I'm going to check this one out.
Yeah.
And I really am happy I saw it in the theater, and it was a packed crowd, and it was a really great time at the movies.
I didn't get to see that one until it came onto streaming.
Okay.
Just because I feel like it wasn't in theaters too long.
It was like the end of April. right? It was like an April
beginning
release.
of May.
It was early May.
May 3rd.
May
But
3rd.
it did all right. It wasn't a hit, but it wasn't
No.
a flop either. So that movie, what I remember most about it being effective in terms of a political movie is there's one scene where they're on a plane and Charlize Theron is making conversation with Seth Rogen, and she's showing that she has a knowledge of like everything going on in pop culture at the time. Like she talked about like Game of Thrones, even though she doesn't have time to actually watch the episodes. And that just, I think, showed the kind of like thing that politicians have to do, which is you have to be an everyman. You have to know all the stuff going on in the world. You have to know about Game of Thrones and different sports teams and stuff. And but you also have to, you know, do this job that takes up all of your day. And how can that be possible? And like obviously they're not watching all these things. It's like when Obama puts out his year-end movie list, and I'm like, you didn't watch all these movies.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that always is like, I mean, it'd be one thing if it was like 10 films I watched this year, and it's usually more than 10, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of obscure stuff. And I'm like, there is no way he's seen all this.
Yeah, he had like Drive My Car and the card counter on there last year. I'm like, okay.
And like 30 plus books and show. Wasn't it series too? Like TV series he's watched and loved?
I don't have time to do that. And I was
like,
never president. What? So
and that would be during years that he was president, right?
Some of them were, yeah.
And so, like, I mean, like so. Now it makes sense, I guess. He has more time.
But even still, I'm like, I think this is an assistant. I'm not saying he didn't watch any of them, but I don't know.
You and I so you don't actively try to stay up to date with television.
It's not that I don't try, it's just that I don't have the time.
Because it's TV that gives me panic, because I'm just like, every day there's a new show that you have to watch, and it's like I can't keep up.
There's too much TV now, which is not, I'm not making a new observation.
It's insanity.
It's too much TV now, and the way that the stream model works, none of it really seems to stick around in the public eye, and shows either get turned bad really fast and it feels like you wasted your time, or they get canceled and it feels like you wasted your time. So
I do think I think there's this motto that make the first and the second episode great, and then you can kind of like
well, that's the other thing is so many shows now, I feel like people who tell me to watch them are like, well, the first 5 episodes are bad, but once you get to episode 8, it's great. And it's like, I don't have time to watch that many bad episodes of TV. That's 4 movies I could be watching right there in that time.
Okay, just hear me out. It takes till season 3, but get to season 3 and it is just extraordinary. Okay.
That's what it's like, though. It's too much.
There are shows that do get better. There are shows that are okay, and then they just like take off. That does happen, but it's not a good way to start, like, to get someone to watch something. Say, get through the first 2 22 episode seasons, and then it gets really good.
There's too many movies I want to watch or have to watch for assignments and stuff. And so I'd rather spend my time with that. Like, that's more my thing.
Like when you have a full-time job and you have a podcast where you're watching old films, it's very hard to keep up with anything, let alone TV shows. But I did binge all of Heartstopper on Netflix, which was wonderful.
Everybody's telling me to watch that. All the gays tell me to watch that.
Oh my gosh.
I should get around. I should watch
Heartstopper. Oh man, I'm just like, if this show had been around when I was 16, it would have been amazing. All right, that takes us to our final segment, Beyond the Flick. Robert Redford, if you could only take 3 of his movies that he acted in to a desert island, what would be the 3, Cody?
So this is tricky because we've already talked about all these movies, but I think for me, it would have to be All the President's Men, which I think is kind of the ideal political drama. I think it's a great movie.
Holds up today.
Yeah, The Sting, which is so fun. It's so crowd pleasing and like just great 70s filmmaking, and Robert Redford's fantastic in it. And then the third one I was kind of torn on. I thought about doing Butch Cassidy, but I think The Sting is better and you get a lot of the same qualities with that. So that takes care of that already. So I went with Barefoot in the Park.
Oh, okay. That's a fun one.
It's not a movie I love, but I think it is so specific to its time and place. And it's a totally easy breezy watch as opposed to the other 2. The Sting is a nice fun time, but it is, about heavier, weightier subject matter than Barefoot in the Park, which is about what if you were in a bad apartment, which has been there. But I think that's a nice early Robert Redford, and he and Jane Fonda are just great together. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I heard I watched an interview with Jane Fonda recently that said like her great love that never came to be was Robert Redford. Like she fell in love with him making Barefoot in the Park, and they were both married. And I think there was never a time in their long lives where one of them wasn't married. Like they just had never. I don't know what his feelings were for her, but she is like drop dead gorgeous and Barefoot in the Park. So I'm assuming he probably had some.
Oh, I would. Come on, look at them.
Barbarella era, late
Uh-huh.
60s Jane Fonda. She's just like stunning. She's still stunning. She's 85, 84, 84, 85. And I just watched an interview with her that she gave like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this woman looks maybe late 60s. Maybe.
She's one of those celebrities that everything she does, I'm a fan of. I think she's an amazing actor. I love her politics. I love the way that she still stands up for things she believes in and always has. She's just, time will be good to Jane Fonda.
And she's been smart to work with Redford over and over. I have not seen their film they made in the late 70s, The Electric Horseman. I have not seen that. I don't know much about that one.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Her career is interesting because she faded away for a little bit in the 70s due to some controversy, and then she came back between 77 and 81. She's in like 9 or 10 movies. Like, it's just like boom, 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 boom.
Well, it is crazy how fast the Hanoi Jane controversy turns into she wins a second Oscar. It's like it flips so quickly.
Like, I mean, she came back with a big comedy, Fun with Dick and Jane, with George Segal, and then she's in Julia, which was a big player at that year's Oscars, and then the following year, I think she's in 3 films, like, and one of them is Coming Home. And then she's in I think before she won her Oscar for Coming Home, she was in the China Syndrome, which I believe was an early 79 release. So she was just,
oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
She was just all over the place and you couldn't avoid her. And she was just doing great work. And so Jane Fonda, yeah, we've talked a little bit about her, but we'll get to her. So we talked about her on the Clute episode. We talked about Clute last year, which is one of her best roles, best films. Love that movie. One of my favorite films of 71. But there'll be a little bit of a gap now. We don't see her for a while on Film of 50.
Took a little break.
Yeah. But so my favorite film, so here's the thing with The Sting. I saw it one time in high school. I don't remember it. So I have not seen it in a while. I have a vague memory of it. So I thought about watching it again in the last couple of years, but I thought, well, it's 73. Let's wait till I watch it again for the podcast. So I don't know what time. Was that at the end of 73? I'm assuming it was like later in the year.
I do know.
I know it won Best Picture, right? It won Best Picture.
Oh yeah,
The Sting. So it probably
Best Picture and like a bunch of Oscars.
So it's probably a fall release. Not to say that it has to be, because The Godfather was March.
Yep. December 25th, which is Christmas.
It came out. It came out. So it came out a day before The Exorcist.
Yep. That's a good Christmas at the movies.
You could have gone to a double feature on December 26th of The Sting followed by The Exorcist. That would have been quite a day.
I mean, The Sting is great. The Exorcist is 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Love the movie.
I get to talk about, I'm like, when do I get to talk about The Exorcist? Okay, we're a year and a half away. We still have some time, but it's coming. The Exorcist is coming. Film at 50 fan.
One of the best movies of all time. Love it.
So I feel like you have to have one of those two. It's The Sting might be in my top 3. I'd have to watch it again. So for now, I love Butch Cassidy. It's a great movie, great Western. I love them together. So I'll put that on my list. All the President's Men is by far number 1. That's my favorite film of his. If I can only take one, that'd be it. That's like my favorite Redford movie. So smart, so well written, so well acted. Just the whole thing is just gripping. It's just like a perfect 70s political thriller. Like, it's just amazing. And Hoffman's great in it too. It's just a terrific film. And I wanted to pick something he'd done in the last 20 years. And for me, you said you didn't like it that much. It was, I think, number 7 on my top 10 of 2013. All Is Lost. I broke down crying at the end of that movie.
Yeah. I need to rewatch it. I think I watched it.
You watch this older man. You watch this older man trying to survive. I can't remember how long. Is that movie just 90 minutes or is it 2 hours? It's longer than 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty
short.
But
it's the season of Gravity, right? We just had Sandra Bullock in Gravity, and that tight 90 minutes of her basically by herself, almost whole movie trying to survive. And then a month later, I saw All Is Lost, and it's a similar kind of story, but it's on Earth, more realistic. And when he is just trying to get help at the end, and he's trying to get help on his little boat, and then it lights up on fire, and he falls off the boat, and you see him just basically commit to his death. Yeah. Like, he doesn't try to swim up. You see him just go down, and he is given up. And then you hear the music starts to come up, and then you see a light, and he looks up, and then and then the last shot of them grabbing his arm, I was gone Cody.
I need to rewatch it. I really do.
Maybe once a year in a theater, something just moves me in a way. And that the final 2 minutes of that movie was so emotionally moving to me. I could not catch my breath. So for that reason, it's on my top 3 because whatever that filmmaker, JC Chandor
Yep.
and Robert Redford did, they did their job for me. Well, I don't have I seen it a second time? I don't know if I ever watched it a second time. I think it was so emotional for me that one time.
Sure,
I said I'm good.
Definitely.
So I really love that film. I think that's my favorite of his acting performances of like the second half of his film career. I really love him in that. So, but yeah, I mean, I wrote down like 10 more great. I mean, The Way We Were is also 73. So we'll get to that. I'm assuming if The Sting was December, Way We Were is earlier.
Maybe.
Like, is that a summer release?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. I don't think it's that early.
October 19th.
Okay. Wow. What a great fall season for Redford fans. We got, I mean, 2 of his most famous films in the same 2-3 month period. That's really cool. 3 Days of the Condor, Out of Africa, Indecent Proposal. And I would say, and Jeremiah Johnson, which we're going to talk about in December. That's also a 72 release.
I haven't seen that one.
Jeremiah Johnson, speaking of where it's just him. I mean, it's like the candidate. He's like the lead of that movie. And I think there are some side characters. That's another one I watched in, I think it was a history class in high school. We watched Jeremiah Johnson. And it's like him all the time. It's the Robert Redford show. So he's in 2 films in 72 where he's really just like the main star. We don't get a whole lot of supporting roles in there.
Sounds good to me.
And I loved The Old Man and the Gun too. That was made my second 10 of 2018. I really enjoyed that film. Sissy Spacek's great in that. If that's like the last lead role in a film, that's a good one to go out on. He was really terrific in that. What a career. 60s to the late 2010s. I mean, not everyone can say that. And he's still hot.
No. Yeah. Listen. We should be so lucky.
Robert Redford, who I should say before we wrap up here, was he wanted to be in The Graduate, right? And Mike Nichols was like, "You can't play this role because have you ever struck it out with a girl before?" And he did, and Redford was like, "What do you mean?" Like Redford, I don't think he's ever had trouble in that department.
He couldn't do that movie, and I love that movie, but no, it just wouldn't happen.
Redford is that kind of actor. He's so handsome that he probably lost out on a couple roles throughout his career because he's just too good looking.
Too handsome.
You know, that's where Jack Nicholson comes in. A handsome guy. Jack Nicholson, I think, is a very handsome guy, especially in the 70s. But there's a little bit of a quirk to him that he can, you know.
Well, he's got the face of Satan, so you know. That's a little. That's
like that's I can't see Redford in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or The Shining. It just doesn't feel right, you know. It's Nicholson. No. All right, geez, I've had you 2 hours, Cody. I apologize. Oh boy. It's been a while.
I didn't even
know. These conversations with you, Cody, just fly by. I've had such a great time. So as we reach the end here, if you can tell our listeners where they can find you online, if you have anything you'd like to promote.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram at CodyMonster91. I write for Next Best Pictures. I'm on a bunch of podcasts for them, and I have my own podcast called Halloweeners, a horror movie podcast where we cover horror movies. My friend Kira and I. It's a very silly podcast. We recently released one on Mulholland Drive, which is not necessarily a horror film per se, but I think we had a good discussion about that.
I need to check that one out. That's one of my favorite films, Mulholland Drive.
It's a good movie.
We did a 20th anniversary episode, a bonus episode last year. And we talked for almost 3. I think that's the longest episode of this podcast. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. I think that's the longest.
A lot to talk about there.
And we barely scratched the surface.
Oh my God, no. You can't even begin.
I was so upset when that rumor came out that David Lynch had a new movie.
Oh my God.
And it was like being reported as facts for like 48 hours. And I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, he has a new movie?
I was so excited.
And then it wasn't real.
Broke my heart.
Like, that was really, I was really upset by that. Because he's one of my all-time favorites, and I just kind of assumed he won't ever make another film. And when that was coming out, I was like,
I don't think he'll ever make another movie, which
I don't think so either.
Like, yeah.
I mean, I think at least we had his new Twin Peaks, which was really cool.
Which was
if that's the last thing he does, you know, he's one of those guys. He's like Kubrick. He doesn't need to have 30 films, right? Like
no, and I think he makes movies when he has something to say. So if he doesn't feel like he has anything to say or wants to say, he's not going to.
Yeah. And I mean, he's getting up there. I don't think, I mean, I don't think he'll want to ruin his legacy either by directing a late stage movie that's not worthy of what he can bring. I mean, I think if he has a great idea, and he has obviously the cast, like he can just go to his regulars, and if he had the right roles and the right story, maybe, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, seriously.
Mulholland Drive. I'm going to check that out. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks for being here, Cody, to talk about The Candidate. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, if you like Oscars history. New videos are touching down every week on Brian Rowe Video. So check that out on YouTube. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.